Kia ora kōrua. Welcome to the Business Your Way podcast. I was thrilled when you both said yes to the invitation and really looking forward to our conversation today.
Cool. No, thank you. Well, I like talking to, I can say this one as Talia probably wasn't as thrilled, but I'm always keen to, I don't know, this will sound terrible, but to hear the sound of my own voice. And maybe there's something in there worth sharing. But I'm sure Talia or Tala, what most people call her, will have a lot of good stuff that she may not be confident about sharing, but there's some gems in there. I'm pretty confident of that.
Nice. Well, then I'll just make sure that I direct some questions your way, Talia.
Oh, no, don't do that.
All right. I always like to start the podcast by giving listeners a context as to who I'm talking to. So if you could tell us who you are, what your business is, and how you make your moolah.
Sweet. I'm going to go Talia to go first.
Yeah.
And I can elaborate and I can tell you if she's telling the truth or not afterward.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Kia ora, I am Talia Musson. I am a blend of Ngāpuhi, Waikato and English. So I sit amongst both worlds, which can be tricky at some time. We are obviously married, so Ian Musson is my husband, and together we have 3 boys. They are 12, 9, and 2. So a little bit of a gap there, which has been tricky in business sense, but we're making it work as you do. We have a business called Toru Whā. Ian focuses on business strategy, and I'm graphic design with a keen, what would you call it? Passion for visual identity, which in simple terms is logo design, if we're stripping it right back.
Sweet. I'm the other half. My name's Ian. So I guess a young, we'll call myself young 37-year-old Māori lad from, I guess, the beautiful Tairāwhiti region. But Talia and I both live up here in Hamilton. We've been here for years and years and years. What makes me tick really is, for lack of a better term, spinning a yarn and seeing how we may be able to either find the challenges people face within their Pākehī, supporting them through those challenges. And for me, just asking a lot of questions. And so for some reason, way or another, I've managed to kind of craft a career out of talking. So if people ask me, what do you do for a living? I'm like, well, to be fair, it is spinning a bit of a yarn. And somewhere in there, someone's seen some value. And I know this is really self-deprecating, but someone's heard or seen something that thought it could add value. And so I've taken that and I've run with it. Like Talia mentioned, we've got 3 boys. We've been intertwined since, over 20 years ago, and been married for quite a while now, but that sounds terrible. Some amazing years, I will say. We spent over half our lives together, and I guess getting together back in high school, the idea was never really do anything like this. And like most good things, I find you kind of fall into them. You fall into them, you find some comfort, you find some excitement, and you kind of run with it. And so, yeah, we set up Toru Whā. We've had, I guess, Toru Whā in various kind of ways for a number of years, and kind of got a little bit more serious a few years ago. Like Talia mentioned, we've got a 2-year-old, and our older boys too. There's a few, tricky nuances we need to work around that. So doing stuff for each other and for ourselves from home actually makes a lot of that doable. It allows us to be parents, allows us to be, mum, dad, husband and wife, as well as doing things that, like you said, bring a bit of the moolah into, not for ourselves, but for our boys. I think it's probably the main driver.
Nice. Love that. And I really want to dive into that husband and wife dynamic a little bit into the podcast. So Toru Whā, how would you describe what Toru Whā does as a company, as a business?
Yeah, so I'll take the lead on that, and then Musson can pick it up.
Pieces.
Pick up pieces, fact correct me. So the notion behind Toru Whā is just like when you start a song. You kick it off with Toru Whā to kind of kickstart something. And so our idea behind I guess, our own brand identity and where everything stemmed from is how do we support people kickstart the thing that they're passionate about. Like I said earlier, my role is helping set a bit of tone, setting a bit of guidance, helping with some accountability, workshopping, and doing a whole bunch of other random things. And Talia brings it to life around probably what a lot more people care about, if that makes sense. The visual identity that she brings people in the door. So our goal really is to help other businesses. We've definitely got a passion for supporting other Māori or Indigenous-led businesses as well. And I think we've both been really lucky that maybe the roles we've held before, some of the mahi we've done in a past life, you might say, has allowed those types of doors to open to us and allowed us to be able to actually find or start to carve out, we'll start to carve out a little niche working in a space where we can support either not-for-profits or Māori-led businesses or other Indigenous-led business. Mrs. Musson, what do you got to say?
That sounds good. I think what started it for us was, really drove us into it was when lockdown happened, we owned a co-working space and supported a bunch of businesses who were mostly SMEs. And we couldn't go in it, so we couldn't basically pay the bills for that place. I didn't feel right about charging clients for a space they couldn't come into. But we saw the need for with small businesses who needed support through COVID. And because we were already at home, we were like, this can be our thing. It's always been a passion of ours to support startups and entrepreneurs and help them get through what is probably one of the toughest times of, our generation when it comes to being in business. And I think that's what got us going. And
yeah, I think it's like a realization that we probably never really backed ourselves for a long time. And you do things, in probably a decent way, and you do all right at them, but you never really back yourself to go and do that more full time or more to actually get more involved in that space. But for me anyway, sometimes the realization is when you see someone else doing stuff, you're like, that could be done better. And that's not trying to put yourself on a pedestal or stuff, but you watch stuff and like, they do that, they get paid for that, they get paid well for that. And I'm pretty certain we could do it better. And that's real, big-headed to think like that. But I often also think a lot of us, particularly as maybe Māori business owners, we are a little bit more self-deprecating, and I'm real guilty of that as well. And so you don't necessarily see that you have the value to add, even though it's essentially the message we share with any customers or any clients we have is you are good enough, you have the ability, you just need some action to put it, or you need to do something to drive it into action. But we're probably the worst at it. And like Talia said, we had a space called No Mai, which was designed to actually support small, medium enterprises. Lockdown happens, people couldn't come into it. You could really feel for them. And what else can we do to support our whānau who are in the space with some of the talents that we have? Yeah.
Okay, so Toru Whā has only been around since 2000, 2020 when lockdown happened, 2021. So it's very recent.
Yeah, so she's a baby.
Okay.
and I guess it's one of those things too that Talia's often freelance as a designer since our first baby. And for us, that's been really, it's a mixture of convenience as well that's come with it. And for both of us and Talia in particular, it's the chance for us to be around our boys a lot more rather than having our baby then shipping them off for someone else to raise. So we're really privileged and to be able to do that is such, and we're always mindful that, that's not a privilege that's necessarily there or open for everyone. And I'm sure when Talia went to study to I guess to learn the things that she does now, that probably was never part of the plan either. And it's one of those things that in hindsight, you look and you're like, actually, cool, there was a plan. We just didn't know about it. And it's worked out for us. And, I always think, for me anyway, we're always really passionate that if any of the kids have an event on, at least one of us can be there. And again, that's a really privileged thing to say, but we also don't really want our boys sitting there looking for mum or dad at cross country or at swimming sports, and mindful that can find ourselves in a posse to be able to do that, which is really nice and really rewarding and fulfilling as a parent.
Yeah. But I think that's the aspiration, right? Is someone has to set the example of what's possible. And whilst you say that's a privileged position, it's actually a vision of what's possible for somebody else. And when we're willing to stand up and lead and say, like, this is what I choose for my life and my family, and this is how I want to raise my kids, we're actually just setting the benchmark for somebody else's possibility, because when they see it in others, they then know that it's possible for them. So, I love that. That was part of like my reason for going into business too, way back in the day. Like my kids are all in their 20s now, but at that time, flexible working was not a thing. Like you turned up at 8:30 and you didn't leave till 5. So going into business was, I want to be able to take my kids to kohanga, to school. I want to pick them up at 3, and then I want to work out how I do work around that. So yeah, I think it's just about maybe privileged, but also showing people that it's possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you want to say something?
No,
Because I'll yarn for ages, you honestly say something. And I also think for me, I was, again, lucky. Like we weren't rich growing up by any means.
No.
Dad was always at mahi, but for a big part of my life, mum was able to be at home for a bit. And, I wouldn't have, I'm sure I didn't recognize it or realize it at the time, but you look back in hindsight, you really appreciate someone being able to be there as much as you could. And I think it's one of those things where once you experience it, and I think for Talia and I, once we've had the opportunity to be a bit more flexible, you really don't want to let go of that. It's like, okay, how do we do this more? And I know, like a lot of people, the ultimate goal is to kind of like, I don't know, live your passion. And part of that is, having the ability to actually spend time with the whānau. And money's good because I need to pay the bills and all that good stuff. But I think, at least in my head anyway, I've kind of worked out, this is really random and rogue, but there's like a number in my head, which is like, if we can have the earning potential, we have the earning capacity to bring in X amount that covers the basis. It allows us the opportunity to enjoy a little bit of life. If the privilege allows itself, we can go on holiday as a whānau. And it's not a huge amount of money, but it's, the basis, and then probably a mindset to how do we do this and how do we create memories for our boys. Like, I know it's more getting away from business into life now, but they kind of are intertwined. For us over summer, it was chasing waterfalls. How do we actually explore our backyard? So it doesn't cost a heck of a lot, but actually, how do we actually figure out what's around us, give our boys that experience so that it becomes hopefully more of a normal thing for them.
I think it's a huge part of our why. When I got pregnant with our first Pepe, I was working for a design agency. And because, like Ian, my mum was at home as well, it's like, how can I create that, build that relationship with our babies and be there for them, but also still live in my world of creativity and not let that almost get pushed to the side. So finding a balance between those two worlds has been really important for us and one of our drivers, I think.
So let's wind back a little bit. So when you owned your co-working space, how long did you own the co-working space for?
Yeah, we had it for a sweet 2 years. Basically the lease. We started something at you couldn't predict the future, but we really wanted to craft the space that brought our personality into it and that similarly attracted, I guess, maybe we're trying to find friends, who knows, attracted people like us into the space. And the driver behind it is, we'd go to a lot of co-working spaces and they're all kind of clinical and sterile, like plain white desks, clean white wall. And our place was probably anything but that, where it was all more character, kind of like our house, if I'm being honest. And how do we actually find and craft a place where people who aren't necessarily in a tech space, for instance, feel comfortable and want to come in and want to find solace and comfort and folk who work in similar spaces to them. So we kicked it off, and then all of a sudden this beautiful thing called COVID popped along. And it was, which threw a massive spanner in the works, and you're committed to do something. And like Talia said earlier, we had mates, customers, clients kind of working in the space. And for us, it just didn't feel right to have to charge them for something that they couldn't access when they're small business. And we could just, we could really resonate with them in their position.
Yeah.
So it was a challenging time, to say the least, because you've got this thing which is costing you something, but you're deriving no income from it. But I guess those challenging times, and this is a real, everyone says it too, and it's kind of a cliche, but out of the challenge come the opportunity. And the opportunity, well, I guess, is we had to be a little bit clever, and how do we actually get some money to pay for all these things? And I guess essentially, when we started to be a bit more formal thinking around Toru Whā.
Yeah, I think we were always contracting, and for me, freelancing. And then it just became, let's put a name on it and let's make it official.
Yeah. Put it up.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I suppose this is where the interesting piece comes in, is you've all of a sudden thrown into this space where you've got a heck of an overhead with the co-working space, with no income coming in. You've been freelancing. How did that affect your marriage, business partner, that working together piece? How did you navigate through that?
Yeah. Me or you?
We've probably got different outlooks, because I'm the warrior and he's like, it's going to be fine. So when the first lockdown happened, which was it March 2020?
Yeah, March 2020.
For me, it was like, oh no, we're going to be in debt. We're going to have all these problems kind of running around in circles in my head. But Ian, on the other hand, it's a little bit yin and yang. So he's the calm under the, when we're going through a storm, he sits me down, levels, set the plan kind of thing. But I think for us, me personally, what that period of our careers and no-mai and stuff like that, that was probably one of the hardest parts of marriage for us, because of, just all the things.
Yeah. And so how did you navigate through that? Like, did you have any intentional strategies, or were you just like working it out as you go? How are you communicating? How are you communicating so you hear one another and you're not just talking at one another? That's a hard space to be in.
Yeah, and like Talia said, I think for me it can be a strength and a real massive weakness, where it's almost too optimistic. I'm like, yeah, sweet, everything's going to be sweet, we'll figure it out. And I guess it wasn't really until we'd kind of ridden that wave where Talia shared kind of the limit she was getting pushed to. And so that's me being oblivious to what's around me and almost too focused on one thing. And in terms of strategy, nah. It'd be nice to say that there was intentional strategy behind it and an intentional play. But it really was, it was almost like a month-to-month thing. And let's figure this out. Let's almost ride this cycle. And again, not really understanding or appreciating the lessons in the time, but then in hindsight reflecting like, okay, cool. Well, we can ride that. There's a lot more we can ride through together. It sounds like we can do like a ride or die kind of thing. But yeah, it was, in my head anyhow, there was real no intentional strategy. It was, let's figure this thing out. And there's probably a part in me where that's pride driven, which again isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. And I've often shared this with people. There's oftentimes where I've got an intent or a goal in mind, I can see the result that I love to get to and that we could see come to life. But at day one, actually how to get there, I have no idea. And the only driver at that point is either the optimism or the hope that we can actually do something that's magical, or the pride that comes with it because I've verbalized it. Now we've got to make it happen. So I think for me, that was the strategy. And there's irony in that because a lot of the mahi I do now is helping people actually do something more intentional as opposed to kind of flying on your wing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because of COVID, it was easy to just take it day by day because things were always changing, and the landscape of how work was getting done was changing. And I think that's why Toru Whā came into it.
It was kind of, I remember it being quite surreal, actually. And this is almost like, not reminiscing, but going back years when having to lock the door for that lockdown. It's like, okay, cool. Don't know when I'll be back. And it's almost letting things sit. But then recognizing quite quickly, driving home in the car, seeing other people, it's like, okay, cool, we need to do something. We just don't know what it is. And that as much as we're affected by it, we probably had customers or clients who were more vulnerable and more affected by it. So I think it was a change of that brought some perspective into it. Is that cool? This sucks, but ultimately, at least in my head, ultimately we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I could say that for the other people we supported. Hence, I think again, probably another real core part of the genesis of Toru Whā is how do we help people to get a little bit more robust in what they do and get them in support them to be in a position where they're really a bit more comfortable to ride any waves that come toward them.
Be a bit more resilient. So, I mean, I'm interested and curious really of like, what does it look like, business, life together as a husband and wife team? I mean, going through COVID, that must have been just like a big blur of what does this look like? How do we navigate this? We're just together in this lockdown, can't go anywhere. That would have just been a big blur. But on the other side of that now and looking, Toru Whā has been a bit more intentional. You've now wrapped around, here's a brand, here's how we're moving forward, here's what we do within this company. How does that operate within a husband and wife and doing life and business together? Do you put some like clear lines of, I've just taken my business hat off, now we can do life together? What does that look like?
Do you want to go first or me? And it's actually pretty, for me anyway, it's pretty easy. Like Ian talked about earlier, business and life is sort of interwoven for us. And it is what we call a whānau Pākehī, so the kids come into it. So I think it hasn't been too bad, and because we live in different spheres when it comes to the services we offer, they don't usually clash, or we don't usually clash, because I respect what he does and his knowledge of that, which is business strategy. And again, me being the creative, he respects what I do. So I think it's been pretty relaxed.
Yeah, I think it's pretty harmonious, and I know that's not necessarily like, well, for us it's easier to say.
I think it helps because we know each other so well, so we know how far to push each other before, he's going to need some space kind of thing.
Yeah, we've probably got, you're right. It's, like you have any team, and to lead people effective, not that I lead Talia, but like if you're in a team and you're trying to lead people effectively, you recognize what they look like when they're well, and you recognize when they're not so good, what that looks like, and what are the coping mechanisms or the strategies to support them. we've known each other since we were like 14. Right. So it's been a while. We've been together since we were 17, so it's been quite a while. And you kind of learn those things, and it's almost like it would take people a long time to learn that about each other in a business relationship. So really fortunate to kind of have life together. Probably the interesting thing is we were really lucky to build a house a few years ago, and we built a house with an office in it that quickly became a bedroom for our baby, because that was clearly planned. But it was one of those things. It was like, cool, here's another addition to our whānau. Here's something else that we can add to the complexities of life, but also the joys of life. So when we're doing mahi together, we're staring at each other pretty much all day because we sit across a table in our garage. That's the bright lights of our garage, basically. But it's also the right space for us to be able to working with our whānau. And so I know a lot of people, they talk about separating work and home and physically separating those things too. Either to our benefit or our detriment. It's literally through a door. And so we'll often meander in there and do stuff that if we can't find each other, we know each other is. But there's also kind of key times where we plan to or not, we'd always come together because we've got an obligation to feed our kids and to pick them up and do all that stuff as well. And so that, there's real set times that you can't get away from because we work at home, which is great, because I think if we're in an office somewhere else, it's real easy to we'll pick the kids up later, or we'll do this. Well, actually, one of us has got to go and pick the boys up from school. One of us has got to take them to swimming. One of us has got to take them to this sport or whatever. And so we're kind of forced, but in a really nice way, to have to rely on each other a lot more in that space.
So talk to me a little bit about how you plan this out, because it would be quite easy to go, my project that I'm working on is more important than yours. You go get the kids, and vice versa, right? So you can all kind of go, I need to do this now. So how do you plan your week? Or do you plan a month, or does it just plan a day? Like, how does that look like for you both?
Well, we might have different answers.
Oh, we could do. Mine would be weekly.
Yeah, I was going to say we plan a week, and we plan it around the activities of our boys.
Yeah.
But you're right. We both definitely have our own priority. And yeah, I guess there's a need to sacrifice a little bit. And sometimes I think it's more me, sacrifice a bit of pride. And because always thinking that, no, my thing's the most important thing. Yada, yada. And then realizing that actually Talia's got something on her plate she needs to do and get done. And I'm better off if I listen to her in that regard. I think for me also it gives it's a good reality check of all the additional mahi she does with our boys, because she does more with our boys. Like, I can claim that I do a bunch with them, but Dad's more you go and pick them up, drop them off, or something where Mum does quite a bit more. And so for me, when she's got stuff that's pressing, I think it's a really good reality check for me that, yep, you've got some important stuff, but she's been doing her important stuff as well as the most important stuff, which is our family. It is a week to week, could be a day to day, depending on certain things and all that good stuff as well. But then you get times like now, school holidays, and that throws a whole new spanner in the mix as well, because you've got the boys right in front of you all the time. There's an expectation from them to need to entertain me, and then we kind of work into that obligation where we feel stink if we don't actually give our boys the FaceTime they need.
The holiday program.
Rather than locking ourselves
Yeah. Every day they'll be like, what are we doing today? We're working.
Yeah, we're working. What are you doing?
Yes. Yeah. But no, I think for us it's a weekly thing. It's what have you got on, this, and this. Okay, this is what needs to happen. Some days it's you're building the ship as you go kind of thing. But more or less, I think it's open dialogue and communicating what you need and when you need it.
Which sounds perfect, though.
It does.
It's far from perfect, but
it's easy said than done.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I get that. But what about annual planning, quarterly planning? You know, I'm sure both of you have got like big goals for what Toru Whā is going to do and what individually your career paths will look like and the things that you want to do in that space. So what does annual planning or quarterly planning look like for both of you so you know where you're going and you know what each other is after when it's what you're aspiring to next in your work life?
Yeah. So I think it's quite hard for us. Like I find it difficult to actually sit down. And so it's a lot of Talia dragging me to, we need to focus on. And it's the same thing when we budget stuff. We need to sit down. I don't really want to, which is terrible. But it's about, I guess for us crafting and setting aside time to be able to sit down and do it and listen to each other. Because I think we've got the benefit and also the challenge of we share everything with each other. And so everything's kind of laid out. So there's a lot of real accountability comes really quick. So if I've said something, she's pretty quick to follow up, which is both great for me, but also frustrating, because I'm like, okay, yeah, I have said that. I know I've said that. I'm going to do it. But like the fact that you always are like, yeah, and it's not like a nagging thing. It's just that she really wants the best for me. I think Taylor really understands the aspirations I have. And for me, similarly with her, and it's interesting because it's probably not a one thing where you sit down and do. It's a kind of a regular, frequent, structured but unintentional kind of corridor that's kind of constant around the things and what's next and what we want to do this year. So it's probably very much to our flavor, if that makes sense. And we've found, I won't say a means or a method that works. I think we've just, 20 odd years of life together allows us the privilege to actually sit down, chat, and just have almost like a feeling, if that makes sense. I don't know if that does make sense. I'm not going to say we connected.
You're
like
telling
this,
a story.
but we I think we have a really good understanding of what each other wants and then how to uplift and push each other. I guess when I ever do mahi, I always talk about not crafting a safe space, but crafting a brave space where you feel uppy but also challenged. And it's a bit self-serving to say, but I think we do that really well with each other, and probably Talia better than me. Yeah, I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yes, we do have big goals, and I think I am the squeaky wheel when it comes to the trying to. He's one of those people who has so many ideas and so many things he wants to do. So I'm the one who has to bring the focus back in and kind of get him to tunnel vision and be like, this is what you want. Don't forget. And he does need a little bit of a nudge. So for us, it's conversations in the car, things like that, because as he said, he's not a sit you down kind of person. And if you do that kind of approach with Ian, he sort of stops listening anyway.
Fidgety. Because I think, like, for us, if I was to think of goals and aspirations, it's more of a lifestyle goal that gets a little more kind of vertically integrated. Mahi comes from that. So I want to live by the beach is the goal. Pretty soon Talia wants to live by the beach because she visits there most days surfing. And it's to kind of have that luxury to actually do what we do, because I think will always work. I think it's something that fills our cup. It brings us, it is the thing we enjoy doing, and it allows us to kind of where's the value we can create around us. Doing that in a space where we can see the moana. For me, listen to the moana kind of feeling, but also have a space where our boys can be reared and raised, and they can see that they have the ability to choose the pathway for themselves. I always say that, there's no one linear path, but we both took real linear paths to work, go to university and so on and so forth. But I think what I really want to approach in our boys, and then anyone else we kind of work with, is that you have the opportunity to pick your path, find what you're passionate about, and let's figure out together how we help you get there. So for us, we want to get to the beach. We want to be able to have the ability to, if it's a really beautiful day, kind of walk on the beach or do whatever. And so what do we need to do now and over the years to come to allow us to achieve that?
Nice.
I think that's right. Or
I think also in mahi, other than the lifestyle, which is great, but I think we are passionate about helping others and supporting people to also choose their own pathway. Our eldest at the moment, we always ask them, what do you want to do? And he's dead set on being a teacher, which is great, but we think he only wants to do that because it's safe. And we're like, but you could choose, what do you want to do that you enjoy, that will give you, bring you something more, and trying to open his mind to the possibilities rather than just what's safe, what will bring in a secure paycheck every week.
Probably not what's safe, maybe what he's seen is probably more accurate. And I guess
hasn't he seen us?
No, I think I guess a lot of other mahi I do is with young people, and you have a lot of Māori and Pacifica young people who we know what we know, and so that's what we see, is that's the option in front of us. And so how do we go about, I guess, providing more of a smorgasbord or a buffet in front of all people so they can have the opportunity to then choose, and choose the thing that they want to do. And I'm always mindful that, what you choose today may not be what you want to choose in 5 years' time. And that's fine. I think gone are the days where you've kind of set up on a career and stayed there for life. It's like, what brings you fulfillment, what gives you value, cool. And that might change, and that's fine. And for our boys, they're all really different. Both how they interact, how they act, how they look, how they're built. And so they're probably going to choose really different career paths and different pathways. And we've had this chat, because our big boy will go to high school next year. Which school would he go to? And I'm like, he'd go to my high school that I went to, kind of thing, which I enjoyed and I loved. But then I'm actually mindful of what's the right school for him. And then also in the future, for our second boy, doesn't necessarily mean that he'll go to the same school, because he might have different needs, different drivers, and finding the best place for him as well. And it's just, how do we, I guess, for me and the work I do anyhow, how do we encourage people to run after the thing that they want to do, and then support them with a means to actually make that or turn it into a living of sort. And that doesn't mean that you're making millions. It could mean that I'm crafting the job I want because that gives me fulfillment. And that's what I love. Like, for me, I'm sure like millions of dollars would be incredible. I'm sure, but I'm also mindful that there's only so many things you can buy, and you get to a certain point where money on top of money doesn't actually mean anything after a while. So what do we need to do to get to a position where we can do the thing we love, enjoy life, and get fulfillment from it, and have the impact that we hope to achieve with it?
Yeah. And I think, for me, we're now in this age where possibility is endless. And I think we are in a generation where we can instill that on our kids and the younger generation. There is no linear path anymore, where 20 years ago there once was. And so now it is, what does your heart desire? What does that look like? What are your aspirations? Where do you want to be? And anything is possible when you set your heart to it.
Yeah.
So decide on what you want to go after. And I think we're in this opportunity now where, Māori business is becoming more prolific. And so we're able to see ourselves as business people more and more and more and more. And the diversity in the type of businesses that are now being run, our identity is changing as Māori, so that's how I look at it, is how can we instill possibility so they can enjoy life and work, and there's not a big brick wall between the two of them and I have to do this and I want to do this. I think we've got more ability to make them intertwined so we live our life the way we want to. So yeah.
And I think also with that is, the ability to actually recognize that a lot of your aspirations can be achieved at home. And at home being, not having to live in Auckland or Wellington or Christchurch or overseas, that a lot of things can be obtained. And I'm sure some amazing things have actually been built from the back blocks of, middle of nowhere almost.
Yeah.
And I think if we can encourage people to recognize that and realize and not feel obliged to have to kind of like leave home to head somewhere to make something of themselves. Our communities get strengthened from that as well, because there's always that idea of, cool, I'm just going to leave, I'm going to go to university, then I'll come home. But you go away, you see the bright lights, and it becomes a little bit more challenging to head back home to, I'm sure the jobs don't exist there, or it's not going to be the same. And so we put our own blocks in front of ourselves. But how do we get people to like, okay, well, let's craft our own path, whatever that could be. We'll make it work, and we'll build the thing we want to build in doing it. Because I know for me, like, our boys will go and do the thing they want to do. I'd love them to be around us forever, but also wanting to give them the opportunity to try things, see things, and then choose the thing for them. And I guess for me, really privileged to, earlier this week, we were in a space where we had 50 Māori and Pacifica young people working together and working through a challenge together focused on business. And the idea behind that was for those young people to come together and see other young people that look like them in these spaces. And like you said, so we see it, we believe it, we recognize it, we can, I guess collectively we do more and we achieve more because it's something that's visual in front of us. But almost how do you scale things like that? So young Māori, not just being in spaces like this, but also recognizing that they can lead in spaces like this. And then also there's no need to kind of challenge or choose who they need to be and how they need to act in that space. Actually, it's cool to be Māori and it's okay to be Māori, and you can be Māori doing anything you want to do and do it your way. So.
Yeah. And it's just about putting yourself in spaces where that's possible. Like, if that's what you want to do, put yourself in the space where you're surrounded by like-minded people who have the same wants and desires. And then when you're in those spaces and you see others, it then creates a bit more drive for what is possible. And your mind gets way more opened up to what you initially thought about. So it's, our kids they'll do what they do, but hopefully as they go through life, they will get exposed to bigger, brighter, better things where they can then open their eyes of possibilities and change their path and change their mind and follow their hearts and live wonderful lives. I think as a parent, that's all we can possibly hope for.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess on top of that, what I'd suggest, and it's just all just personal opinion, but for those Māori who find themselves frequently in those spaces, recognizing that it actually is quite a privileged space, and with it comes what I would consider a responsibility to open those spaces to other people. I think for me, it was 1 year working with a bunch of young people, bringing them into a corporate space, and then being really like taken aback that there were brown faces in these spaces, and they were blown away. And you're like, oh, actually, cool. It's a learning for me, because this is something I see and have been a part of for a while, but it's actually new for some of our young people. So actually, cool, there's a responsibility of how do we open those doors more, so it can become the norm for our whānau.
Nice. Yeah, love that. So thinking about your journey, and it's looked very different over the years, what will you think would be some of your like key milestones where you look back and you just, those moments that you celebrate, or the moments that were the biggest growth that maybe changed the trajectory a little bit, or changed your mindset, or changed your thoughts of what's possible? Where were those big moments?
You go first.
The first big one was making it through the lockdowns of 2020 and still having a co-working space by the end of the year. But then making the decision that it might be a new path because of what we'd been through with COVID. That was probably one of my biggest pivotal moments. And then for me, it's just an accumulation of little things, the small wins that add up, like designing something that a client takes away and gives them the confidence to be able to do their mahi and to give them the motivation to accomplish the goals that they had originally set out to do, things like that. And I think mindset changes for me is because I'm such an introvert, and for years and years I just sat at home doing my graphic design kind of thing behind the desk and being like, well, I should try and collaborate. I should get out of my shell a little bit, and pushing myself to collaborate with a team and things like that, and building confidence from that, and feeling like I can be safe in new environments for a very introverted person. So little wins for me.
For me, I'm going to be a bit more heartfelt. I think for me, it's, milestones, because mahi and life is so intertwined. Milestones are like, the boys getting born, and then realizing and recognizing pretty quick that you've got a responsibility that's more than just yourself.
Yes, that's a good one.
Well, because then you realize pretty quick that you're like, you've got this precious thing that's so tiny that they can't look after themselves. So you need to do something. You need to be there, support and upfeed them. And then how do we look after ourselves so we can look after them, and so on and so forth. And that, for me, that comes from both a work perspective, but then like our youngest is 2, so he's going to be finishing. He's going to be at high school, and I'm going to be in my 50s kind of thing. And so I still want to be that alpha dad that could just dominate the other dads at that point is my goal. And so, how do you keep yourself in that space where you can actually do like real daft things like that, but are things that are going to make me happy? Kind of, I guess, other milestones within from a work perspective is I always get a lot of joy when, if Talia's done work for someone, and how proud they are of it, because it's something that they've wanted and they may have been dreaming for a time, could be years, who knows, and this is the fruition of it coming together for them. And that's a massive step for a lot of people. For me personally, in my mahi, when people will ask me to come back for stuff, I'm always like, cool. Because for me the biggest kind of compliment is someone wanting to re-engage with you on something different, but they want more of you to support them with what they're doing, or there's a referral or a recommendation that goes somewhere because you're like, cool, I thought it was all right, but clearly you have as well, so I appreciate that. And it's like anything, you get introduced to someone's friends, you're like, cool, there's a trust that exists there. And those little wins, again, you might not always notice them in the time, but you reflect and you're like, cool, that was amazing, that was super cool. And then you start to recognize and realize the different doors that get open, and there's a point in time where you wonder why they're opening to you. And I even think now we still question, why did that person reach out to us when there's a whole bunch of other folk who could be around the table for them? And again, it kind of comes back to that self-deprecation where you're like, we're okay, but are we good enough for that? And it's how do we get over that, basically, and actually kind of work through and actually recognize that, cool, you've got some value. People are seeing value in it. So actually they see it. So why don't you see it and back yourself a little bit more?
Mm. Nice. So what's on the horizon for Toru Whā?
Yeah. Wow. It's a great question, because I'm always like, how do we... Well, I guess for me anyway, the focus is how do we support more? How do we do more, recognizing that scale is a little bit difficult for us at the moment because what we do is so intertwined to who we are. But how do we scale that so we can support more of the people we want to support, or wrap around more of the people we want to be able to uplift and lift up in ways in which we can, without completely kind of doing our own heads in, if that makes sense. So for us, I think it's more of a, how do we get to a point where we can replicate systems, you might say, and that sounds quite transactional, without reducing impact. That's quite a personal thing. So it's that balance, which I think is always a challenge for a lot of businesses that want to grow. And sometimes, for us, it could be a sit down and think process of actually, maybe that's not what we want to do. And then actually getting bigger isn't going to derive the impact we really want to, because then perhaps it becomes more transactional. I do this for you, you pay for that, rather than actually let's really get ingrained. For us, I think our customers are friends, and you get to know them really well, and you get a greater understanding of what they need, based on those friendships. And so it's someone could come out quite easy and say, we want to be leading in this space, that space, yada, yada, yada. But I actually don't think that's us. It's more, how do we derive more impact by what we do? That might look like serving more people. It might look like a whole different offering in the future.
Still working out what that might be, and what scaling a business might look like for you, given that impact is your biggest driver.
Correct. Yeah. And it's one of those things that, I guess I've been really privileged to work in spaces where you help groups of people to grow and build people to build their businesses. And it's how do we do that without relinquishing the quality that people receive from that. But then also I realise and recognise that for a lot of our Māori whānau, just crafting spaces where they can be and where they can engage and interact with each other is kind of half the battle, because they don't often see each other in those kind of business spaces per se. And so how do we actually build the environments, or curate the spaces, or create the environments where that can happen, where we can actually bring more Māori entrepreneurs or Māori businesses, or anyone kind of together, to recognise that they're not on a battle by their own, but they're not on a journey on their lonesome.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. So as we wrap this up, what are 3 things that you would want to share with other businesses or other business owners who are growing that service-based business? So where it's their skill and their time that they're using to build their business. What are kind of 3 tips or 3 key points that you've found useful in growing your service-based business that you would want to share with somebody else?
Cool. 1, 2, 3.
I'll say 2.
Okay.
The first one for me would be consistency. Set your goals and be consistent with working towards them. In the early stages of business for us, it was always, I'll do it another day, or I'll get to it when I do. Something else crops up, a project might, but does that project align with your overarching goals? So being consistent with just chipping away at those big goals. And then secondly would be systems. These are things that, like I said, we were building the ship as we went kind of thing. So creating systems early to make your life easier down the track would be another one for me.
Sweet. Number 3, what I would say, and I'd say this works for small business, large business, sole traders, so on and so forth, is don't deviate from your course, or don't deviate from your values and your vision. It's really easy as a small business to see an opportunity that opens itself that has cash flying in front of it, the shiny thing, and you jump to, and you do something because it serves the now, but it doesn't actually support what you set out to do. And I think a lot of people in general, we dart to the shiny things. We're like puppies, and we find the thing, we find the next thing. And I'm like that, which is terrible. And so it's how do we, and it's okay to say no, unless you turn something down, don't just take it because it's been offered to you. So it's, staying true to yourself, recognizing, and again, that probably does come from a really privileged space to say that. But it's get yourself to a point where you realize actually these are the things I don't differentiate, or I don't deviate from, sorry. And just because I've got coin in front of them doesn't mean that I'm going to do them. I can focus on the things that I set out to do.
Yeah. And I think that's how we will build our business quicker and faster, is when we don't follow the money in terms of shiny object, when that money isn't attached to the long-term goal and vision. We can spend years following that money because we can, as opposed to heading in the direction of where we want to go and what we want to build from the outset. And if we're consistent with doing that and build the systems around it as you go, you'll get to where you want to be a much faster. So love that. Follow the vision, know where you're going, be consistent about chipping away at it, and build the systems that makes that easier as you go. Very sound, wise advice, if you ask me. So as far as if people want to reach out to you, know a little bit more around like what you do, what that looks like, how do people reach out and get in contact with you? What's the easiest way for that to happen?
Cool. Yeah.
There's a few ways. We're on social media, so Facebook, Instagram. We also have a website, toruwha.co.nz, and then Ian's on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, I think for me, like social's a really good way, and it's interesting because 10 years ago people would think you'd kind of point your nose at something like that, whereas I probably haven't carried a business card in years and years and years. And people ask you the question, how do we get in touch with you? Like search us, hit us up on socials. And it literally is, an Instagram message or a LinkedIn message if you want to be a little bit more formal as such. It's kind of where conversations start. But we're not the most formal people. So I'm always for a chat, and people just yell out, hit us up and all that good stuff. And we're pretty responsive because I guess for us, it is only the two of us. So we know if someone's responded to something or not. And we try and get back to focus as quick as we can. But you can follow us on socials and all that great stuff. Just search up Toru Whā. Instagram is probably the best spot because that's where Talia kind of displays a lot more of what we do, and kind of shares a bunch of content around the things we get up to and the fun things we do and the cool people we get to hang out with and work alongside.
Love that. Beautiful. I love a good Instagram. I love being visual person. Instagram is perfect. Well, thank you both. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, and actually just getting in under the hood of what it looks like to operate a small business where it's you, your skills, you're doing what you love, you're integrating whānau business, it's all one, and you're living the life that you want to live in the way that you want to live it. So thank you so much for spending this time with me, sharing your story, and just sharing that with the listeners. I really hope that those that listen to the podcast really take away that there's not one way to do business. There are many ways to do business, and we actually have the power to choose that pathway. So, ngā mihi kia kōrua.
Yes, thank you.
Cheers.